For WXXI, this is Connections, filling in for Evan Dawson. I'm Gino Finelli. Today is December 30th, 2025, the 364th day of the year, and barring any sudden changes and the curse I'm about to set by saying this out loud, the end of a very busy news year. This has been, to put it lightly, a busy year. We saw changes at the federal level as it began aggressively pursuing undocumented immigrants, and a government shutdown which struck fear on the future of SNAP benefits and housing vouchers. At the state level, we saw new programs offer free school lunches and a ban on cell phones in schools. And locally, we saw Democrats absolutely dominate in local elections. Scandal upon scandal in Irondequoit politics, the continued clearing of homeless encampments in the city, some long-awaited movement at the vacuum oil building on Flint Street, and so on and on and on and on. I've been looking through the list of stories that we've done over the past year, and I don't even remember some of them, given how much has happened. So today, we're sitting down with the WXXI news team to talk about the headlines of the year and what we expect to go in the year moving forward. But before we do that, I wanted to start by having investigations editor Brian Sharp introduce the newest reporting member of the WXXI news team.
Thanks, Gino. Yes, today we have here in studio and in office our new Albany reporter, Samuel King. And yeah, speaking of this past year, you know, I was thinking through at the state level, you had the break between Hochul and her lieutenant governor, now gubernatorial opponent. You had the prison strike and very busy legislative session that went on and on and on. And that is where Samuel is headed here as soon as this snow lets up enough that he can get on the thruway and get himself down to Albany, get situated, and prepare for a new legislative session. So, Samuel, tell us a little, or I guess tell the listeners a little about yourself.
Yeah, his name is Samuel King, moving here from Virginia, where I was working in local television, but I've worked in public media at several stations and covering state government, and including in Missouri and Minnesota. But New York is my home state, so it's good to be back here. And, you know, some of the things you talked about there, you know, some things that are going to be lingering into the next session, and sort of the impact of federal budget cuts that we saw, and how state leaders are going to manage that and manage, you know, without sort of impacting services too much. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, this is a kind of a critical time for journalism as a whole and public media as a whole, given what happened over the summer with funding from public media. And it's great that we still have a presence in Albany, and that we are able to kind of grow the footprint that we were having going into whatever comes next at the state and federal level.
Yeah, for folks, I guess I really, you know, I think of our Albany team as a dream team, also with Jimmy Vielkind there and John Campbell, two very veteran reporters that Samuel and Samuel himself, a veteran, will be joining. So we're going to be, you know, we're expecting some great reporting, great journalism come out of Albany in the year ahead.
Yeah, those two added into the equation. You couldn't really ask for a better reporting team. So it's exciting of what comes next here, and the kind of work we'll be able to do out there. So Samuel, thanks for being here, and excited to see what you have coming up.
Yes, thank you, Jeannie. Thanks for having me.
So to start this hour, after starting the hour, have Brian Sharp, investigations editor, and Jeremy Mole, deputy editor at WXXI News, and we're going to be talking about some of the top stories of the year. And the first one, I think, top of mind for me, and I think a lot of the listeners, is immigration. We saw Rochester get thrown into the middle of a political firestorm in March over its sanctuary city policy. But Brian, you and I have both done a lot of work contextualizing the data here and what we've seen over the past year. And I want to get an idea of what does it say right now about what's happening with detainments of undocumented immigrants, with the ramp up of enforcement by ICE. What are we seeing right now, and how has it been playing out over the past year?
Well, I think, like you said, it's definitely ramped up. You've seen it in really all facets of where folks are going. I mean, I think there's things we haven't seen yet that we may still, but you know, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we did a story, I think, almost midway through the year where arrests had already surpassed statewide what had come the year before. We saw it start early on with with visits. We saw a pregnant woman who was detained and ultimately deported. We saw, like you say, the case in March that brought the additional federal attention, put the sanctuary policy front and center. And we've just seen, that mobilization of both our ICE agents, Border Patrol, and various folks.
Do you think that there's an end in sight to it from what we've been seeing so far? Do you see it tapering at all?
No. My sense is we're still just getting started.
And so that means there's, unfortunately, going to be a lot more of this over the next year. And unless something changes, I think that it's going to be something that we're going to have to keep a focus on of what comes next here. We're seeing a lot more instances of people that, might be in the legal process of trying to seek asylum or seek refugee status, as we saw with the case of that we've been covering for the past week, Omar Jimenez Ramos, that they're going after people that are trying to follow the rules a lot too. So I think it's escalating to who they're going after. And
right, and I think that's the point that still needs clarifying. Because there is a sense, and there is undeniably some of that they're getting picking up folks who have past criminal histories. I don't know that we've seen pretty robust efforts in past years. This one has been, though, obviously more so. But I think there's still a perception that we are getting the worst of the worst. We're getting just the bad guys. We're getting people while they are at work. We're getting people while they are coming out of Home Depot. We're getting high school kids when they're sitting in the park. We're getting, workers, folks who don't have criminal histories as well, are getting swept up in this. And I think that's the question is, at what point, or I guess for how long does that continue, and how far does that go?
Yeah, it's an unanswerable question right now, right? I think that this administration has really put this is what we are doing no matter what kind of thing, and they're unwavering in this idea that it is going after violent criminals and cartel members. We've seen those every pretty much request to the Department of Justice about why a detainment happened. They come back with this is part of our agenda to crack down on violent criminals and cartel members. And so they're sticking to that rhetoric, even though in practice it doesn't seem to be playing out in that way, that this is who is being gone after. And it is a question of, will it back off, or will it just keep escalating until you run out of people to arrest eventually, I guess. You run out of people to detain at a certain point.
Yeah, I think, and then the ever-changing statuses of some different temporary statuses or parole statuses or other things getting canceled, then that widens the potential pool of folks. And this isn't to say that, there are people who are getting, we see the things coming across from the U.S. Attorney's Office. There are folks who are getting picked up, who are getting charged, who are getting deported. You also see mixed in that, though, a good amount of folks who are arrested for attempting to come over the border. And that is their sole crime.
Yes.
And I guess that's the question. And there'll be folks who say, well, if you're here and you're undocumented, then that's illegal, and so you should be removed. At the point that they've been here for 20 years, set up a family, are paying taxes, are working, or doing everything else, I guess that becomes the question of social good.
Yeah, and to touch on the sanctuary city portion of all of this, there was an interesting conversation I had with the city's attorney last week about the kind of the argument that the federal government is making in regards to the sanctuary status of cities, and that not being in this country illegally is a civil violation most of the time. And in some cases, if you have crossed multiple times, it becomes a criminal violation. But most of the time, it's a civil violation. You overstayed a visa. You just crossed over and have been here illegally. It's a civil violation. And this ongoing lawsuit that the federal government has against Rochester, The argument that the city is making is that effectively you are trying to commandeer police officers to enforce federal civil law, which I don't think anyone could argue a local police department that's their job, is to enforce civil law at all, let alone federal civil law. And it creates this really interesting situation where the argument that the federal government is making is that law enforcement has this obligation to enforce all federal law, civil or criminal, where police are, relegated to criminal law. That's just what police do. And it kind of is, it seems to be actively trying to change the investigation or the definitions of what law enforcement is and what they're supposed to be doing. And I think it remains to be seen how that argument stays up in court and what that will look like, what decision will be made on that. But it is a very strange kind of dynamic that is broken down here of what the federal government is asking for and how different it is from what we traditionally believe our local law enforcement to be. And I think that we have a long ways to figure out how that actually is going to play out, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think this discussion or debate is going away anytime soon.
I don't think so either. And I think tangentially related to this, we saw a new federal administration come into power, which is it's Republican leadership and a very different kind of political dynamic than we saw for the past 4 years. There was a big shift in of tone at the federal level over the past from the past 4 years to this new administration. At the same time, we're seeing the same shift happen here, but in the opposite direction. This year's elections, long Republican-held town supervisor seats flipped Democrat, many of them, including Greece, the largest suburb in Monroe County, has always had a Republican supervisor. As far as we can tell, they've never had a Democrat run the town, and now they do. And it shows that we both reported over the years the dwindling enrollment in Republican membership in Monroe County. It has been surpassed by people that are completely unaffiliated, and it continues to gradually slope downward as time goes on. And this year seemed like a turning point of like a lot of the seats that have long been Republican held started to shift, and we started to see the Democrats really starting to take hold across the county. So I want to get a sense of what you think happened here and like what might be lending to this kind of trend of at a national level, we do see this rise in Republican prominence, but here it seems to be going the opposite direction.
Well, I think there's the just the demographic shift that you see. I think no party is a big element of that, and probably a thing that folks are going to have to be confronting much more in the future. And this isn't where even, and I think we're going to see more of this, where this isn't just a blue wave united. Everybody on the Democratic side is lockstep. You have a progressive wave, a younger wave that's coming in. I think that is going to continue and probably show its face even more so. Jeremy, you're looking like you're wanting to jump in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of gets left out in this discussion about the changing enrollment, political demographics in the suburbs is how long in some of these suburbs the Democrats were really working to chip away at these boards. I look at Penfield specifically, and they have been running candidates since I started covering county government in like 2007. And they just kept doing it, and the enrollment went up, and eventually they got people on the board, and then they got more people on the board, and now they just have total control. That was aided by, a shift in who lives where in Monroe County, who's registered in what town. They do have a Democratic enrollment advantage, but that groundwork really is important in these towns.
And I look at, if you want to get an idea of the fragmenting of Democratic politics, the city is a great example of this. The city, Democrats dominate everything. There is no Republican in any elected office in the city. And we look at the city council race over the past year, and you had winners from the more moderate camp of people that were largely just kind of what you would expect a Democrat to be, fairly progressive, but not really full bore into leftist political philosophy, and then you have people that are the people that are on the People's Slate, people like Kiara Smith and Stanley Martin that won their elections. Stanley was the highest vote getter in the primary, that are self-avowed, totally socialist, and it shows that like the race became between these two factions of the same party in a lot of cases. In pretty much every way you can define how that legislative body has looked, it is this division between two factions of the same political party. So you're right to say that this is not one united, happy family of Democrats. This is, well, you're seeing that the party can now win elections, and what I'm expecting to see going forward is the fragmenting within the party of like who within the party wins elections.
Right.
What political philosophy rises to the surface. I think that remains to be seen too. Like in the suburbs, I think the more moderates are going to have a easier time. In the city, I think that's changing.
And I would expect you're probably going to see, just talking about the progressives and the younger generation, you do have some very established, long-standing Democrats in the suburbs, and I think there's some movement to challenge some of those folks.
And I think you're going to see too, along with the, you call it fracturing. I think you're going to see Democrats taking different approaches in different communities, and it's not because it's because they're individuals. They'll have individual differences, but the needs of a town are different than the needs of a village, which are different than the needs of a city. And that's going to drive some of what these newly elected folks do.
Right. As somebody pointed out, as evidence of we're not one unified thing, Stanley Martin is the top vote getter in the city. I don't know that Stanley Martin could win a town board seat in Penfield.
I kind of doubt it. I don't know if she'd want to.
No.
And it is when I was on the show following the election, we talked about the kind of the Mamdani effect of his win in New York City, of like, okay, well, that kind of political democratic approach of being more leftist play out largely across the country. Will that become a trend? And I think it will in some places, but I think we're right to say that, yeah, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. And when you're getting into local elections, what plays in the city doesn't play in Penfield. Mm-hmm. And that is just a simple reality of the politics we have here. And it does show that, hey, we're losing this kind of long battle of Republican versus Democrat, but we're going to gain this long battle of moderate Democrat versus progressive Democrat. Well,
we've had factions within the Democratic Party, the Gantt-Morelli split that existed for a good number of years. Democrats have never been a fully organized, unified front.
Yeah, you're always going to have different coalitions and wings and, the progressives and the moderates, and that's always going to be there. It's just how they work amongst themselves that will be interesting to see.
And this is the thing we've talked about a lot, is that we've kind of lost that factioning as far as political dynasties go. We don't really have that much anymore. I think Joe Morelli's kind of faction, who's around him, is really the last one that you could point to, and it's still not that many people. It's a few electeds. I would say Adam Bellows probably in that camp. Jeff McCann is connected to that camp as new Greasetown supervisor. But yeah, that kind of, for lack of a better term, cult of personality, singular political dynasty that someone like David Gantt had, I don't think we got that much anymore. Maybe it'll come back. I don't know who's going to lead that, but we shall see. To shift gears a little bit, I want to talk about a story that, Jeremy, you've been writing about for a long time, the vacuum oil building. This is like the first major movement we've seen at this site over on Flint Street since 2008, right around there.
I want to say that's right. It's been that long. I've been covering this since the folks at DHD bought that property, and I believe that was 2008.
So, fill us in. What exactly happened here that it's taken 20 years for any kind of anything to happen?
Sure. Well, it starts with DHD buying that property, right? And they had plans to turn it into sort of mixed-use development. they needed to do a big cleanup first. That's when we talk about vacuum oil, that's a former oil refinery there. It's an former, like 33 acres of former oil refinery in the southwest of Rochester. So they didn't get very far. They did some cleanup, some testing, but that was about it. It languished for a long time. There was a foreclosure case against the property. They had ran into some trouble with paying some loans. That got kind of resolved when ExxonMobil bought that property. ExxonMobil is what's called the successor company to Vacuum Oil. It means there was a bunch of mergers over time, and now Exxon essentially like swallowed something that swallowed Vacuum Oil at some point. So they have now stepped up and said, well, there's more. There was a lawsuit filed by the city to get access to the property. To resolve that lawsuit, Exxon has agreed to come in to test the site, the 5 and 15 Flint Street sites, to remediate them. The short of it is, this is really major movement on a project that has just languished for so long.
Yeah, and I think it's if a person listening has never seen this building, understanding the kind of blight it was is kind of, it's hard to put into context, but this is right on the riverfront, this massive abandoned factory warehouse building.
I have described this building as looking like something plucked straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah, that is a great way of putting it. It looks ominous. And besides the beautiful mural that has been on it for a very long time.
And to be honest, I'm not sure how much of it is left standing at this point. Another big milestone, they started dismantling that building a while ago.
So now it comes into the process of figuring out how much contamination is actually at the site. And that, my next question would normally be, what are people talking about putting there? But at this point, we don't know if we can put anything there.
Yeah, I think what you're likely to see, I think they have some idea of what the contamination is like there. There has been some testing that's been done by the city and other folks over time. They're going to get a better idea of it. They're going to remove the contaminated soil. They're going to fill it. I think probably what you're going to see is eventually some type of housing and commercial mix down in that area. It's really, it's a great spot along the Genesee River. There's a gorgeous view of downtown. It's going to be very desirable to someone to develop.
In a very rapidly changing neighborhood. That part of Plex is a very quickly developing spot. The refinery building has become like a really major cultural and business hub in the city. So this idea of it staying just a crumbling factory facade for forever is, I don't think that's possible. I don't think it could be that way.
And that's going to lead us to discussions down the line about displacement and gentrification and things like that. Because as you said, the neighborhood is already changing a little. If something new like that goes in, it's going to create a lot of change.
Yeah, and we'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely.
And I think the other thing that you have reported on a lot over the past year, and I had reported a little bit of some of the stuff related to it, was the SNAP benefits and food insecurity that we saw kind of rise out of the government shutdown, and some of the fear there of how fragile this system is. I was reporting more on the housing voucher side of things and the kind of fear of people losing their homes, and you were reporting on the SNAP and food benefits part of it. And, I think to me, what I was seeing at the time was like, this is kind of scary that like all of this kind of, at the end of the day, hangs on by a thread that can be broken really easily.
Yeah, I mean, they call these things safety net programs for a reason. They're what's supposed to catch you when everything else doesn't. The SNAP crisis was just, I think that was something that was unimaginable to a lot of people. And it came at a time where food insecurity in this region is already rising. So there was a big fear, and I'm not sure what the numbers look like, but there was a big fear that the shutdown and then the new work requirements for SNAP, which there have never been work requirements for SNAP before.
And those kick in. Yeah, sorry.
I think they've already. Well, no, I don't want to say anything.
They're January 1.
Yeah, they might start next year. I'll admit I don't know the exact time frame, but people are worried that a lot of folks are going to be kicked off of SNAP or not remain on SNAP, however you want to phrase it, because of these new requirements, and that could exacerbate food insecurity. So we're not out of the woods yet here.
Yeah, and this work requirement portion of it, this is a highly controversial proposal that multiple studies have demonstrated that it doesn't necessarily do anything to help. It actually will actively hurt people that might actually use those benefits. And I think we're going to see a lot of change over the next year when that goes into effect.
Yeah, I mean, in Monroe County, before all of this, there were 104,000 people who were on SNAP. That includes families with children, elderly people. It actually included a very small number of people over 100 years old. That was fascinating when I heard that little statistic. These are our neighbors.
And the idea to it's just a scary thought that we're heading in a direction where we're taking a 101-year-old person's food away. I don't know if that's
I think those people were not in danger of losing their benefits because of a work requirement. I'll just put that there.
I don't know. I think they need to get back to work. But
So just to put I guess, Googled this real quick. They started phasing in November, deadline March 1st, benefit loss beginning June 26th. And if the wonderful AI is to be believed, it's which was just my quick lookup, was requiring up to age 64 to work, volunteer, or train for a certain amount of hours per month.
Yeah.
I completely trust AI and everything, so I'll say that's correct.
There is one other aspect of this too that it's wonky, so it gets overlooked. But these new work requirements for both SNAP and the eligibility requirements for Medicaid, some of the changes that the federal government is making to reimbursement formulas, those changes are going to cost counties in New York millions of dollars. Monroe County, tens of millions of dollars just itself.
All right. On that note, we're going to take our first break of the hour, and then we're going to switch out some reporters and continue this conversation of our year in review. And we are back on Connections. We are having a reporter roundtable. The whole pretty much newsroom is here right now. So I hope nothing happens over the next half an hour. So now we are joined.
Us.
I mean, if so, Denise will run up, right?
Yeah.
Our executive editor.
Sure.
Go ahead.
She's got it. Let's all just take the rest of the day off.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
So we're joined now by Noelle Evans, education reporter for WXXI News, and Raquel Steven, health and community reporter for. What is your title?
Health, equity, and community. Thank you.
Health, equity, and community. Second to most fashionable person in the WXXI newsroom.
Who's the first? I'm sorry.
Come on.
Okay. I'm top two. I'm definitely not number two. Okay.
Believe what you want to believe. And we're going to talk about some of the top stories that you both have been covering over the past year. Noelle, I want to start with you talking about changes at the state level to school lunch programs. Over the Governor Kathy Hochul approved over the past year more than doubling of the funding for free lunches in schools and up to $340 million. Mm-hmm. This is a big deal. I mean, it's a big change, and I think that most people just look at it as, well, you're feeding more kids. That's the goal here. But I think there is more nuance to it. There's more motivation beyond just food itself. I think food is probably the biggest one, but I want you to kind of lay out to me what is the goal and impetus here for trying to expand this program.
What we've heard from state officials is that it's about increasing attendance. It's about helping with students being able to focus in class. It's about raising test scores, improving those learning outcomes. This is like the school year of firsts. I mean, universal free lunches and breakfasts, actually. And before I go any further than that, notable that there's been more than 150 million free meals to students as of September to mid-December, I believe. That's across the state. When we looked locally, we saw at some school districts, including Honeyway-Lima and also Pittsford in particular, where the number of meals being served, especially breakfast, shot up quite a bit. So that's notable, and we'll see, if there's anything to kind of point to, if there's correlation or causation, if we look at test scores going forward or what have you. but yeah, the free universal meals, and then also the statewide ban on internet-enabled devices, electronic devices in schools, and that's another initiative that was pushed by the governor and also the statewide teachers union, and as a matter to improve not attendance necessarily, but attention in school, improve hopefully the idea being social skills and a whole lot of other things, and addressing some of the harms that have been identified, especially for youth mental health when it comes to access to social media and all of that.
How have students been responding to that, of, having to put their phones away?
It sounds like a mixed bag. I've heard, folks saying that there's a positive side to this. There's a sense of like anxiety relief that they're not missing out necessarily on, something that might be going on that they're not tuned into mid-class period. But then there's also the sense of like, why can't I just continue to, I don't know. I mean, I'm not talking to students every day. I'd love to hear more student response. And actually, that's something that I'm hoping to hear more about going into like this next semester for students. And it's going to be different from like middle schoolers to, high schoolers, what the effect is for them.
I mean, as a 32-year-old man, my phone rots my brain on a regular basis. If I was 15, I don't think that, I don't think you can live a functional social life when you're just staring at a screen all the time.
It's rough, especially when you have algorithms on social media that are designed to keep you glued to the screen as well. Yeah, there's plenty that is kind of working against you when you have a teenage brain.
Well, we're not clear, are we, even how this is being enforced across, because anecdotally, without naming school districts, we've heard that there is at least one district where the kids just stash the phones, and as soon as there's a break, run into the bathroom, and that's like, then power on their devices, and off they go for the in-between class time. So I think there's a question still on how exactly this has been rolled out and is being enforced. And
yeah, that's a very good point, Brian. And that's something that it's supposed to not just be something that you just leave in your locker or in your backpack. Like there were some guidelines from the state. There was some money allocated for, using things like Yonder pouches and things like that, or cubbies or something. And so, yeah, across the board, it doesn't sound like it's being enforced in the same way. And that's just a very good point.
And knowing how having a 7-year-old who would probably find every way around, things. I'm sure kids are enterprising enough to be thwarting things.
I will say
at the chance.
At the Disconnected conference in Rochester, which was hosted by the New York State United Teachers, one of the arguments was actually it's giving students an opportunity to learn how to work around a rule, and that can develop some skills as well.
Yeah.
Teenagers are really good at that. They're always working around rules.
We did a Tiny Mike episode on this. We went to one of the school districts and posted outside for let out, and parents, the way parents are responding to it, it's like, I need to get in contact with my child. If in case of emergency, how can my child contact me? So parents are not too fond of it. It looked from the people we interviewed. So that's another perspective.
That is another aspect of this too, of some of the teachers that I spoke with who are like, I have kids in elementary school that have phones, and the students aren't the issue. It's the parents reaching out to the students in the middle of class. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of dynamic there.
Yeah, and it's the broader social question of, are we all just way too interconnected right now? Like, are
we okay?
Yeah,
are our brains designed for this?
We're not, and it isn't, and this is one day it will all collapse.
Well,
But
and if I could mention one other quick thing about all of this, when we talk about mobile devices and student mental health, you also wrote about it was then a proposal for the social media warning labels that Governor Kathy Hochul recently signed into law. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and what effect that has on everything.
Yeah, that too. Also, this is the first academic year for colleges to have the hotline 988 on student IDs. So if you get an ID if you have a student ID that is from like July 1st onward, as of 2025, this is the year we're in for another day. That 988 number, which is like the suicide and crisis lifeline, is supposed to be on that ID. The idea is that when you use that at a dining hall or to get into a building, it just keeps that number. It's like a matter of awareness, and also if you are in a crisis, the number's right there.
Yeah, I'll go out of my lane and have an opinion and say I think that was a good idea, because if you think about what they did with 911 or what they do with 911, you see that number plastered up everywhere. If they do that with 988, people are probably more likely to use it.
On this note, too, you had a pretty long investigation that you finished earlier this year on school safety, and that the release of that story coincided with a tragic incident at the School of the Arts, where a student fell to their death from the roof of this, and it's caused kind of a reckoning within the school district on dealing with student mental health. And so I want to touch on there of what you've been seeing and reporting on over the past year when it came to how schools are addressing some of these crisis scenarios.
Yeah, that's really heavy. I almost forgot that the investigative report came out this year, because it feels like a very long time ago that we had worked so hard on that. That was a story. A student reported that he had been sexually assaulted by another student during the school day. We looked into the school safety and educational climate reports, which are public record, and that's through the Dignity for All Students Act, and found that that wasn't marked. Like there are categories for assault, there are categories for bullying, there's categories for discrimination, and we looked into across. This is a state law, and when Brian helped a lot with this, looking at that and seeing how little seemed to be reported, like including 0 reports of bullying at a school. And I think of just like my own experience at school, like it would be remarkable to go to school and not witness or experience bullying within a day or a week. There are real consequences to that. If you don't have that reporting and something is going on, how can you identify it and then address it? The week after we reported that story, there was this death at School of the Arts, a 19-year-old student, 15-year-old student. And what came of that from the school board is a mental health ad hoc committee looking at the policies and seeing what policies and practices are in place and what can be done to prevent another tragedy.
Yeah, it's a tough issue.
It's very tough.
But I would say it's very, very rare that a circumstance like what happened to School of the Arts happened without any warning signs popping up at any point in time. I know that personally from my own experience in life, and I also know that just from anecdotally. It seems like there was probably build-up before that happened, and how do you catch that build-up before it?
Yes. How do you catch it? How do you address it in a way that is productive, that is helpful, and doesn't push somebody, to a breaking point? And so and these are 2 very different stories. These are separate, but it comes back to school culture and a feeling of safety and belonging in school. Do you have trusted adults? Do they know what to do? And one of the things that came of that committee report is making it a policy that all district staff receive mental health training. And that was something that is just not in the policy right now for wellness.
Yeah, and I think you're right, they are very different stories, but they are also married by the circumstances of it. They are very tightly connected, and how do you deal with the overarching issues?
Yes.
Even if they are by very different circumstances in and on themselves.
Yes.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the other thing that I was thinking about of how they're connected is kids are a whole stew of emotions and everything. So to have that mental health training and how to address that and work with that sooner, I think was the other thing, is we have to start looking at earlier intervention. And I think the thing that came out of the report that we did of the other student was, this is also a population that you need to be able to figure out a way to track things across the board. So if this teacher sees this, that's also communicated to this counselor, that's also shared with this other teacher when that student moves to a different classroom. And you have a very mobile population. So it's a challenge, but there are very real consequences to not getting it right.
Yeah, if you start having these questions about when is a person in crisis being serious about being in crisis, especially when you're talking to a teenager, yeah, a lot of times there's not going to be any real serious issue there. And if you ignore all of them, though, then you're not going to get
Right.
to, if you start saying, well, they haven't done this yet, then we can't really do anything
But
about
also
it.
the right approach.
Yeah,
Like,
there
you
has
don't,
to be the
like,
right
pull a
approach.
kid out of class and drag him to the counselor's office and demand to tell me about your problems. That's not going to work.
Even being suspended, that can make it harder. Like, I mean, whatever. Okay, so in like middle school for me, like I got suspended because they wouldn't let me back into school until I had like a psychological evaluation to make sure that I was like okay. And that was very difficult, and I don't think that's not an approach I would really recommend. You're removing peer supports and things like that. So I'm very interested to see how schools move forward, because student mental health is a very serious topic that is something that when it comes to addressing mental illness or even just, distress tolerance is something that I think now is it's always an important time to address it, but now it's a tough time to be alive, I think.
And I think the very simple reality that we all have to recognize is there is no easy solution. There is no one size fits all answer, and there's nothing that anyone could ever do that's going to prevent any possible tragedy from happening in the future. It's just not a reality. That the world is a scary and cruel place sometimes, and that is the simple reality of it.
Yeah, it's a scary enough and big enough issue that the former Surgeon General called it a crisis, like declared it a crisis, the youth mental health crisis.
All right, on that note, we're going to shift to talking to Raquel about some of the, frankly, some more positive things that are happening
Please,
in the
yes.
health space.
To the rescue. Yeah.
And I first want to talk about a story that you reported on this year on the University of Rochester Medical Center is offering home hospital care. This was kind of born out of overcrowding in hospitals.
Yes.
And I wanted to get, kind of fill us in on how this works and what kind of gap it might be filling to kind of make this kind of more intensive medical care more accessible to people and to, not always have to be a hospital visit to receive it.
Yeah, so this particular program, the Hospital at Home, right, program, it's basically bringing the hospital type care to the comfort of your own home. And officials say that about 10% of inpatient visits could qualify for this program, and it is an extensive qualification. You have to live within 30 miles of the hospital. You have to have a home that fits the criteria, and you have to be able to at least be independent enough to use the equipment, or savvy enough to use the equipment that's there. But it was a resolution for overcapacity. If you go to the hospital emergency room, it can be a lot. It can
It's
be
brutal.
overwhelming, right? It's at a crisis level, right? And people are in hallways waiting to be seen, and you're waiting for hours. So this was a resolution for that, and it turned out to be actually pretty great for patient care overall. Providers are seeing that patients are just having that independence to take care of yourself, knowing what to do to care for yourself. It just is better for the patient's well-being. So what was supposed to be a resolution for overcrowding turned out to be pretty good for just recovery, patient recovery.
Yeah, and I think that I think of a lot of circumstances where a person might have a chronic illness and might not want to go to a place where there's a lot of disease.
Yes.
Someone who might be taking oxygen might not. It's just exhausting to get up and go over there and have to wear a mask the whole time. And when you could just do that from home and get checked out in the way that if you don't need someone actively doing surgery, you might not need someone physically there to do it for you.
Yeah, and you get I guess you get better access or you have more access to your provider, right? So you have a nurse that comes in twice a day to check you out, and then you have daily telehealth visits with your provider. So something you may not be able to have access to in the hospital, because we know providers are overwhelmed in the hospital. They're checking out hundreds of patients at a time, but this, you are actually dealing with your provider every day. You have a nurse at your side twice a day. That sounds like luxury to me, healthcare luxury. So I think a lot of people are going to hopefully use this service, this at-home hospital service.
Yeah, I think like during COVID, we saw like what happens when everyone rushes to the hospital
Yes.
and that need acute care. I mean, the system is very fragile,
Yes.
and it can be overburdened very, very easily.
Yeah.
And I think this is like one of those things where people seem to be looking at it a little bit differently and trying to think of a solution to that.
Yeah.
Of what can we do to avoid that kind of problem in the future, if it's avoidable. It probably isn't completely, but
It's a good start.
and to close off, I want to talk about a topic that you have written about a lot over the years.
Extensively.
Extensively.
My
I know
baby.
this is
Yes.
a very important topic to you. Maternal health. And it's one of those things in health and pretty much any factor of society that's one of the most obvious disparities that you can see in anything. CDC data from 2023 shows that mortality rates for Black mothers is 3.5 times that of white mothers.
Yes.
5 times that of Asian mothers.
Yes.
And so you see this racial disparity very obviously. And how are we doing here? How are we faring here in kind of addressing these like really, really long-standing racial disparities that we're seeing in maternal health?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on who you ask, right? I mean, I've interviewed a lot of officials. Senator Samara Brooke. This is something that she's very passionate about, and she's said a few times like, we're doing a lot, but we haven't done enough, and the numbers are not showing that we're doing enough, right? Here in Monroe County, in the Finger Lakes region, Black women are 50% more likely to deal with pregnancy-related illness, right? Whether it's preeclampsia, whether it's hemorrhaging, sepsis, but we are on the way, right? And we're raising awareness. We're putting people in place to help, like doulas, and making sure that doulas feel valued and therefore, being present. But yeah, here in New York State, Black women are still 5 times more likely. Nationally is 3 times. Here in New York State, 5 times more likely. So, Governor Kathy Hochul is making this a priority as well, but we still have some way to go.
Mm-hmm.
But we are raising awareness, right? And Black mothers or Black birthing people should be aware that this disparity is real. So when you are in the healthcare system or giving birth or on the way of giving birth, you should be ready to advocate for yourself or make the proper preparations, because this is still happening.
Yeah, and that disparity existing only contributes to more distrust in the system,
Yes.
and it's a spiral that can happen when you don't address it head on.
Yes.
To close out this hour, I wanted to go around the room and what's everyone's New Year's resolution?
Oh,
In your
This is so cute. I love it.
yeah, Raquel, I'll start
Raquel
with
can
you.
go first. Yeah, that's great.
My New Year's as far as what, work related or just in general?
Whatever you want to share with us.
My New Year's resolution. Ooh, I haven't really thought of that. I really haven't thought of a resolution because I feel like I'm already working towards what I want to do. I just doing work related, just doing more profound, relatable stories, and I would say stop drinking as much. Try to stop drinking as much. But as journalists, it's kind of hard. But
Yeah, tell me about it.
But yeah, I feel like health and wellness. Just living a healthier lifestyle.
Noelle, on to you. She's shaking her head
She's
no,
like,
which
"No,
means I
please,
have to go
not
to her
me."
next.
Because you were looking right at me, and it's like, no, pass. Give me a minute. I don't know. I tend to, on like New Year's Eve, that's when I figure it out.
Yeah.
And I like sit with it and I reflect and all of that. I don't have the answer right now, but I think really connecting with community more, making sure that I'm there for my friends more, that for sure.
Oh, that was good. Yeah, ditto.
Brian?
I'll dovetail off both those. More balance, healthier, and as far as connecting. I lost a good friend this year who, when he was remembered as someone who always said yes to every adventure, to every opportunity, and trying to do more of that.
That was nice, Jeremy.
Oh, they're playing me off.
Sing us out, Jeremy.
Well, I don't really do resolutions, but there is one that I have to do this year. My Apple Watch keeps yelling me about my cardio rate or cardio fitness. I got to improve my cardio fitness so it stops yelling at me.
I don't have one. I'm doing great. So thank you all for being here. This is great. I already see you too much, and we get to spend more time in here. So,
It's too much.
there you
Yeah,
go.
love it.
Well, yeah, thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.